Hello, my name is Timothy Marshall, and this is my Module 5 assignment for the LEAD6113 class, and it's titled Adult Learners and the Gogies. One of the tasks we were asked to perform in this assignment was to link the Gogies and with regards to the adult education learner regarding face-to-face and online. Since we're talking about adults and the methods of andragogy are specific to an adult educated learner, I'm going to basically, whenever you see the word andragogy throughout the presentation, is to, for any references to that goji, I'm going to include by default pedagogy because that's where andragogy grew from, the area of childhood education evolving into some of the concepts that are similar with regards to adult education, and linking Heutagogy, which is self-directed education primarily in the realm of the adult education complex. From Blaschke, I'm taking a linking approach where they state even though that there is a teacher-learner relationship, andragogy is pretty much still a self-directed approach by the adult themselves. And then Heutagogy, where the difference, and even though there are still teachers and instructors involved, primarily the activity is focused and determined by the learner. In andragogy, there's the concept of single loop learning, where there's a problem that's defined by the instructor, and it's up to the student to determine outcomes that will solve that problem. In contrast, in heutagogy, there's this concept of double loop learning, where the experiences and the environment of the student help develop that problem case itself, and again, you go through the same. After that, you incorporate problem description and outcomes, but also the double loop learning part of this discussion focuses on not only the learning the outcome and the solving that particular problem, but taking what you learned through the process of solving the problem and incorporating those activities that become skill sets to approaching the next problem. In andragogy, we're looking at competency development. So that's, here's the task. Can you perform the task? And you are measured against expectations with regards to that specific task. In heutagogy, you're looking at developing not only the ability to solve tasks, but the behaviors and the values and the approaches and skills that you learn while solving that task. So the task itself, the competency itself is implied, but you're also learning greater ways to approach new tasks and develop new resources. In andragogy, it's still similar to pedagogy in that there's a linear design and approach to the learning environment. So there's a stepped design to learning specific tasks, learning specific skills, and then moving on to the next skill. In heutagogy, there's not so much that linear design. It's a heuristic, holistic model of taking a look at the entire learning process at once without having to do any step-by-step environmental requirements. So this really matches the type of program that we're in now, where pretty much the big question is being asked, and there's no specific way of going ahead and approaching how to answer a question, but you do take into account all the competencies that you've learned through research development and through statistical analysis, how to solve that problem, but without a linear step-by-step approach. Andragogy, similar to pedagogy, this is still an instructor-learner direction, where the majority of the oversight is provided by an instructor. The tasks are provided by an instructor. Even some of the guiding to the outcomes are provided by an instructor. In heutagogy, and this really fits well with an online rather than a face-to-face environment, it's learner directed, where the student might be posed a big question by an instructor, but it's totally up to them in which direction they go and where they go to find information and activities that can help solve the problem. Primarily in Andragogy, you're getting students to learn content. It's the typical classroom experience that evolved a little bit more into just lecture and then activity. Here, the teacher is more of a mentor, more of a guide, but there's still a very specific approach to how to go and gain access to content and delivery. Here, it's the instructors are more focused on helping students getting to them to understand how they learn, how they process information, how to be a critical thinker as opposed to how to perform a specific task. So where do these overlap? How do these Gogies perform similarly? I basically tried to show where some of them stand alone in regards to teaching practices and where some of them share common activities and drills, or the way an instructor or a teacher or a professor or a guide interacts with the student, where they are specific to their each Gogi and where there's some common oversight and where some common practice. So teaching practices, if you're an instructor, how do you help determine what's the best Gogi to entertain? So through the research, these are both learner-focused. These are in common. They both focused on the adult learner. They are basically saying this is even though there's instructor activity in both of these, the bulk of the work is and the bulk of the learning is on the backs. It's on the shoulders of the adult learner. They are provided with some lecture in the Andragogy, hardly any in the Heutagogy, but they're still both focused on the learner. So I think that's the important statement to make is, as we're migrating and evolving, and Ashton and Newman talked about this extensively in the article that I'm referencing, in that this is a major shift from the sage on the stage to self-actualization, self-organizing the learning environment. But both of these do focus and place that focus on the learner. With regards to some teaching practices, if you're an instructor and you're teaching something that's pretty much brand new to a student environment where they have no previous background or experience in the course material, and they are an adult student, the andragogical methods of providing content and wisdom are pretty much related to just that method of teaching practice. And in comparison, in Heutagogy, you're most likely working with an adult population that has some concept of where and how the issues can be addressed, and taking into account that there is still that learner focused, there's still an instructor or a mentor or a guide, but they're not there to provide so much content and wisdom. They're there to provide access to information and to answer any questions that might come up, whether they be process questions or content questions. But those questions must come from the adult learner in a heutagogical situation. Those activities are primarily on the shoulders of the adult learner, and they're responsible for gaining the content comfort as opposed to gaining content just from an instructor. So online, how do these differ from face-to-face? Well, in an andragogical environment, online environment resembles a classroom. It's similar to the face-to-face classroom, and not too many differences are going to be introduced. The only one being introduced is the lack of being in the same physical space. So in an online environment, in an andragogical environment, there's going to be the student waiting for the instructor to provide them with specific activities, whether they be a specific assignment to gain knowledge, perform a specific experiment to gain knowledge, or to visit a very specific part of that classroom, being online, that gives them that's highly relatable to many adult students who have been in a classroom. So it's the extension of a a classroom into an online environment that provides comfort, but also provides some restriction to access to information. In comparison, the online environment of a pedagogical educational experience resembles more or less a library, where a student is provided with a question and then given the entire access to the internet to find their answer, whether that be a vetted answer, and a vetted answer is something that's been peer reviewed, something that's been listed in a vetted database or a vetted subscription that is provided to them by their institution. But it's not as structured as a classroom. So it's here's the question, and without giving any idea to what the possible outcomes will be or can be, the student is left upon themselves to perform the research, to look for and vet specific information. And even though it's online, it does resemble that library. You need to know what section of the library to visit. You need to ask a reference librarian. If that activity is pretty much the same as whether you're working within a journal database or not. So you're knowing that reference librarian is guiding you to a specific area of information that has been accepted as fact in a group. So online, face-to-face, those are the differences in the Gogies. I show that there's some overlap between the online environment of Heutagogy and Andragogy in that the student can refer back and forth to an instructor to gain that access to questions that have questions answered if there are areas of concern. So we bring that from the beginning to the end of this discussion with regards to teaching practices. What that student, though, does need in both of these is a common method of, yes, making sure their competency is either a learned competency or a competency that's been validated through their behavior. And that validation and certification is very important in today's world because, from a self-actualization perspective, it's nice to know that we now know. But you want to be able to prove that in certain areas, whether it's to make sure you get that next degree, that's that certification piece, to walk back into your employer and say, these are the skills that I've gained, this is the knowledge that I've gained from a content perspective, and this is an organization that has validated that activity, and those are typical of working in a school structure. And since schools use both of these competencies, both of these practices, that I determined that is a common method, a common practice, whether you're using the andragogical model or the heutagogical model. So here are my references, and thank you very much. And this is my submission